Today we do something different. We move from those examples with the houses and the trees. I actually wanted to do one more example for mouse interaction with that, and I have it somewhere. Let me see if I can find it. Was it this one? Yeah, it was this one. I wanted to do something like that you look through this kind of telescope or binoculars or whatever, and that you can see out the window using this. It also has some kind of distortion effect to the houses, but I'm not going to teach this anymore because of my leg problem and delaying the course a little bit. I want to skip ahead and teach today how to make buttons on the canvas. And this is not going to be as easy as it sounds, because canvas is something that you can draw on. It's something that you can animate on programmatically, but it doesn't have any built-in draw button or interact with mouse component. So unless you're gonna find some kind of libraries that help you to do this, you need to implement this interaction yourself, figuring out when the mouse is on top of the canvas, figuring out where on the canvas it is, and is it hovering a button or not, and is the user pressing the button on the mouse. These are some things that do not come inside the Canvas API. And I'm going to teach you one way of doing this today. And we are starting with an empty project. It just has this overlay that I am removing here so that I debug more efficiently. But basically, we have the empty canvas from the first project setup that we did on the very first lecture, and all the code that we write today is going to be from scratch, kind of like to remember a little bit what we did and to focus on the buttons themselves. So let's see. When we want to draw a button, we can think about a little bit how to encapsulate this, how to make the code so that we can maybe reuse these buttons in future projects. So I'm not gonna put everything just as functions thrown here, and I'm going to consider classes and objects that could be used to import this functionality in other projects as well. So let's begin by creating a button class and try to see what we want our buttons to look like and things like that. So our button class is going to have a constructor, and the buttons themselves need to be told where they are. So let's say give them a location, and maybe we're gonna have square buttons at least to begin with, and give them a width and a height, at least for now. And I'm going to store these properties inside the button itself. So great. This button will need to be drawn somewhere. So let's give it a draw method and give it a canvas context as a parameter here. So we can draw this button on any given canvas that we give as a parameter. We usually work with one canvas, but today I think we're going to use two of them. So this is quite handy. Let's see. To draw, I'm going to use this rect function, but let's rehearse a little bit with this translate again. So first I'm going to translate to this location, the first component of the location, so the x-axis, the y-axis, and then I'm going to say a rectangle from minus this width divided by 2. So I want relative to this center point halfway to the left, halfway to the right, halfway to the top, and halfway to the bottom, basically. So we start drawing it halfway to the left and halfway upwards. And its width is going to be this width and this height. So I remind this method expects here the top left corner and then the width and height. That's just how this method works. And it's gonna fill our rectangle. But because we use this translate, we should save the context and restore the context after we did this drawing, because if we work with multiple buttons, then translating it again and again and again, it's going to accumulate in a very weird way, and then we lose control. So these are needed because of this translate here. Okay, so let's try to, okay, we actually don't have the canvas here referenced either. My canvas is declared in HTML and it's called my canvas. So let's try to initialize this canvas here. I'm going to use a global variable for this. Okay, and yeah, we should set its size. I think that let's continue to use the same things as last time. So give it the size of 1000 times 1000 pixels, square canvas. Yeah, let me see here. Right, so this is going to be now proper size, but we should add also a button to see if this works. So let's say I'm gonna add a new button and I'm gonna put it somewhere. Let's put it in the middle of the canvas. So say this is going to be now our location attribute here, and I am expecting an array here, an array object. You may ask why I'm working with location like this and not with objects like, for example, having a X and a Y here. So why do I prefer this array? Because I've noticed that some of you actually do like this in your work, and it's just a preference thing for me usually, but it goes a little bit more than that, because with the array notation I can use any dimensional points. And actually, I think in a couple of days we are going to, I mean, in the next, some of the next lectures, we will work with 3D locations to some extent. And then I would need to add a Z also. I'm not sure, but we may even work with 5 dimensions. Let's see. So then what do you put after Z? It's very common in my research and in general to work with multi-dimensional feature vectors. And it's kind of like a habit that I have, that everywhere I use dimensions, I use this array notation, so I don't have to think about what comes after Z and so on. But you don't have to do this, so definitely it's your own choice. So now let's give it the width also, and I'm just going to give it the width of 100 and 100 to see if this works. And draw this button on the canvas. So draw on the canvas context. So canvas get context 2D. This should work if I did it properly and I made some mistake. I can see here that I have an error in the console. Okay. Is anybody?
I think the spelling of context is
the context?
yes, I think the spelling is not right.
Okay, let's see.
Yeah,
you mean that in the past code I used to do something like
there's missing one closing mark.
Yeah,
line.
yeah, you're right. You're right. I don't need necessarily to define the context, but it's better like this. So what we are learning now is that it's missing this it was missing this closed bracket here. That was one error, and I also noticed a typo. It's context here. So let's make it so that all the things that you are saying are proper. It's not a great idea to just pass this kind of get context here inside the function, because the code is clear in this way. So I accept both of your suggestions. Okay, still some error here. Yeah,
There's some spelling error
I'm sorry.
in
spelling is
ctext.canvas.get
still not right.
context. Yeah, spelling is not corrected.
Get
Yeah,
context.
right there.
Oh yeah.
Get context.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. I'm really blind today. It's weird because my leg hurts, but my eyes are just fine. Okay, so we have now a button and it's in the center of a canvas. It's a black button here, so we are not really working too much with the color just yet. Let's say that we want to make it a red button and pass here also color. Then we need to set the field style to this color and our code works. So now we have this kind of button and we have some kind of parameters here. So for example, I could set the width to 200, which makes it a rectangle. I could work here and use some different kind of shapes. I could make it a round rectangle, I mean with rounded corners. I could make it a circle. I could actually make it any shape I want, but I'm using here the rect function there. The thing that I want to say is that today I want to implement a method for handling these buttons that is independent of the shape. So it will work even if your buttons are going to look like some game characters or whatever, and you want to have pixel perfect collision detection with your mouse. And this is some especially useful method for games if you want to extend your button to be something more than just a typical button. But today I will just practice with these rectangle shapes to get something to work. So you can play with changing the shape if you want when you test this later. Okay, so we have a button there, and now my mouse is here and it's not reacting with it in any way. It's still stays as a arrow pointer. It doesn't hover over this button in any way. If I click on it, nothing happens. So basically, this is an empty canvas with a red rectangle on it. It doesn't matter that I'm calling it button here. It's not a button, at least not, doesn't behave like one yet. So what I want to do next is figure out how to get the mouse location from the mouse cursor. So this is something that we do by adding event listeners to the canvas. So an event listener is added like this, and here the first argument is going to be which event we are looking for, like mouse down, for example. And then I'm going to have to specify a function that says what to do when this event is triggered. So let's say on mouse down. And this argument here is going to be the event information, the data coming from this event. And I'm just going to say log it for now. And if I refresh the page now, okay, I'm getting some error. This canvas was lowercase. Now nothing happens, but if I click, anytime I click on this screen, I'm getting a log here in the console, and these numbers here change. And you can see that there are quite many of them: screen X, screen Y, client X, client Y. If you click on this, you may find even a few more: layer X, layer Y, offset X, offset Y. It's a bit confusing to know what all of these are. I'm just gonna tell you the way that I handle this. There are more ways that you could detect which X and which Y refers to your cursor inside the canvas, but this is now one way that I will show you how it's done. Yeah, let me see. I have some notes here because I don't remember this myself all the time. So we want to get a location here. Get mouse location from this complicated event object. And to do that, we write something like now event target actually is going to be exactly the same thing as canvas, but because it's coming here inside the argument, I'm using it instead of the global variable. It's better code in this way. And then get bounding client rect. So this is going to tell me somehow the coordinates of where the canvas starts and where the canvas ends inside the page. So the canvas could be anywhere inside the page, and this object is what helps us to get that. And to get the final location, let's say location, we use this event client X minus the left side of the of this rectangle, and the other one is going to be event client Y minus the top part of this rectangle. And now here, instead of logging the entire event, I'm just going to log the location, which contains only 2 numbers, which are easier to read. So let's see what we get in this case. If I click here around the top left corner, I would expect to see 0, 0, because this is where the canvas starts on the top left corner. And my bottom right corner should be 1000, 1000, because my canvas size is defined as 1000 pixels by 1000. So this is what I'm expecting to get. But let's see what happens. So, okay, I'm getting undefined here. Yes, I'm not returning this location here. So I'm defining it, but it needs to be returned so that I log it here. Okay, so the values here on the top left are very close to 0, 0. They are not exactly, because my mouse is, I'm not so pixel perfect when I click. And then when I'm moving more towards the center, they are growing, yes, as expected. And then the bottom right corner is 370, around 370. So this is not 1000, what you would expect. And actually, this gets less because when I do this, like now, if you look at this, it says just 186. So these values are now not what I expect to be, because in the way that I'm resizing this screen and stretching the canvas to fit on any kind of size screen, like a mobile phone or a tablet or whatever, this get mouse location is not good enough. It's not giving me the pixel coordinate inside the canvas. It's giving me something else. It takes this stretching into account. So to get this to work, the way I do it is I divide these values by what is the maximum, the width of this rectangle, essentially. So this rectangle right minus rectangle left is going to be the width. I actually don't know if there is also width property there or not. And I'm doing the same here thing here with bottom minus the top. So this is usually called scaling or normalization. What I'm gonna get now is values very close to 0 here on the top left corner, and values very close to 1 on the bottom right corner. So this 0.98 is really, really close to 1, and it's gonna be really, really close to 1 even. It doesn't matter what size my canvas is stretched in CSS. It's still a fraction, a proportion of this maximum rectangle size. So basically, if I want to get them scaled between 0 and 1000, which I think that I'm going to do today because I have 1000 pixels there, I also need to scale this with the size of our canvas. And one thing that you may want to do, even though JavaScript is quite permissive, is maybe convert these numbers into integers, because we will be dealing with pixel locations, and having a pixel that is 10.5 from the left doesn't really make sense. So JavaScript will allow you to work with these, but it's easier to read in this way. And yeah, that's at least what I'm doing now. So now the values here are very close to 0. The values as we are approaching the bottom right are very close to 1000. The value here is going to be 0 on the X and almost 1000 on the Y. And this one here is 1000 and almost 0. So now it actually works as expected. Anytime you click on the canvas, you're going to get the pixel location that you have clicked on the canvas, and it will not matter how this is rescaled or what screen size you're using. Okay, now the next thing that we are going to do is figure out if we are pressing the button or not. And the way that I'm going, yes?
I managed to get 1 and y coordinate is -2 with that math.
Really? How did you do that?
I have no idea, but it says 1 and -2.
Are you sure you have here X, Y, left top and right, left, bottom, top?
Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting.
I have no idea.
Okay, that's kind of weird. I've tested this on multiple browsers and different kind of CSS configurations, and it was working just fine.
Also notice mouse down event listener broke my other event listener. They don't work together.
Could it
Interesting
be
to know.
maybe your setup has a little bit more things there, and somehow they are interacting with each other?
No, because I just disabled the other one.
Okay. I think
anyway, moving on.
Yeah, let's move on. So the next thing that I want to figure out is if I'm clicking the button or not. And to do that, I'm going to actually use the trick of the day, which is figure out what color I am pressing. I am hovering on when I click the button. So if it's going to be the red color, which my button is defined as now, then I know that I am clicking the button. So you will find many implementations of how to do this online, or you can think about many, like figure out if you are inside the button rectangle area. But then if your buttons are circles, then you have to use another formula. And if your buttons become complex shapes, then it becomes really difficult to figure out if you're inside that shape or not. So this color trick will work any kind of buttons that you are going to draw on the screen. So let's see how we do that. We say get color at the location, and let's pass here also this canvas context. So I don't have this canvas context here anymore, but basically I want to know where I'm getting the color from. So I need this context here. And let's just print this color here. So the function to get the color is going to use a method from the canvas context called getImageData. So this getImageData expects the X location. So I'm getting it like this, the Y location, and then how many pixels I want to get data for. This is a little bit tricky, but basically I could get the pixel values not just for one single pixel, which I am doing today, but I could get for a big area. I could even get all the pixels from the entire canvas if I want, and it's just going to list them in a very, very long array. So let's see what happens if I return this full data here, and this is going to log it. I still need to process this data a little bit, but let's see what we get here. So now if I click, I'm going to get the image data object, which contains a data attribute. Okay, first it says 1 pixel, 1 pixel width and height, because these are these values here. If I'm going to change this to 2, for example, then I'm going to get 2 and 2. And notice here this array of values is bigger. I'm going to just go back to getting 1 pixel information because that's what I need. And this one only contains 1 pixel information. So previously I had 4 pixels and 16 values here. This is the value for red. This is the value for green. This is the value for blue. And this is the value for transparency. What color is this?
White.
No.
It's nothing.
Well, this is white. So maximum amount of red, maximum amount of green, and
Black?
yes, this is black, but it is a black that is completely transparent. This is actually what the color of the canvas is by default. So the thing that I have here making my canvas white, it's just a CSS trick. My canvas is actually transparent black. This is the default thing that the canvas is colored like. And if I click now this rectangle here, you're gonna notice that my data is a little different now. It says maximum amount of red, which is true, no green, no blue, and maximum opacity. So this is not a see-through color. It is completely opaque. Okay, is this confusing or? Right, so I can return here instead of this very complicated object with many properties. I could actually form simple string with this RGB format, and I could say data of 0. So this is going to be the first value, comma, and then I'm gonna concatenate this red, green, blue, and let's omit the alpha. I don't need the alpha today. So this is gonna be an RGB color, and we are gonna focus with just that. So now when I'm getting these, okay, let me erase this. Now when I'm clicking, I'm getting black, which is a little counterintuitive because of this CSS, but this is black everywhere, and this is red, essentially. Okay, so I kind of know when I'm pressing this one button here, and let's, for the sake of this testing, create another button here that is a different color and offset it a little bit. So let's say something like that. This is going to be button 2. Okay, something that I don't expect to happen is happening. Am I making some problem here, or is this color not going properly? Oh, sorry, I'm missing here a begin path, and if I don't do that, then the second color is going to be used on both fields. It's something a little bit more you probably experienced this. I'm not gonna go into big details with it. So now I have two buttons, and one of them is gonna give me this. Notice that green color attribute here is not actually maximum green. It's just a constant that is defined in HTML. And this one is actually maximum. So if you actually want full green here, you need to do RGB 02550, and you will see a lighter green coming here when I refresh. So this is the green pixels are going to be as bright as possible, maximum brightness basically. We don't need to do this, but just for your curiosity. Okay, and yeah, so now we get the color of this. We get this black color and this one. So basically, we could figure out when we are over one button and over another button using this color technique. Before you ask, I will teach you how to make this work so that you can color your buttons the same way, but it will be at the end of this lecture most likely, so be patient. Anyway, so now we learned how to work with color, how to work with the mouse and get the location, and hopefully this works for everybody, and I hope that, was it Sami, has some kind of issue in the code or yeah, so I think that this should work for everybody, but if it doesn't, then I will write some comments or whatever, and yeah, so okay, what next? So we have mouse down, right? But and we have some kind of way of detecting when we are clicking one or the other. But how about making our mouse pointer look like the hand cursor? So this is something that typically happens when you are hovering buttons. See here, when I'm in the developer console, my mouse pointer changes. So this is happening on hover, which means that I need to detect this using another event listener. I'm going to say mouse move. And I'm going to need to define a new function for this mouse move. So on mouse move, I'm actually going to do the same things. I'm going to get the location of my mouse. I'm going to get the color of that pixel, and basically I want to know if this color is a color of the buttons that I defined or not. If it is the color of one of the buttons, then it means that I am hovering over the buttons. Now I don't have access to these buttons anywhere. They are just here in the main. So I'm going to, for now, make them as global variables, and I'm going to store them into a simple array here. So instead of having button 1 and button 2, I'm going to say buttons add one element to this array. Add the other element to this array. And I need to draw both of these buttons. So let's just have here a simple for loop. By the way, I'm using var everywhere. When declaring variables, you can use var let const usually. So there are some differences to these, but I got feedback from some of you guys that they are a little confusing. You can read on them. I'm not going to insist too much on them, but there are times when you should use one or another. I decide to use var now because the code is less confusing overall what is happening. So in case you're wondering. So I'm going through all the buttons here, and I'm going to draw all of them using the for loop. So I avoid duplicated code here. So I'm adding the buttons into this global variable, drawing all the buttons, and I believe that the code for now should, okay, should be pretty much the same. But in the mouse move, this color, I want to ask, is this color the color of any button or not? So let's say if the color of one of the buttons is equal to the color that I just clicked on, okay, then something needs to happen. So let's say here, let's log this for now. Otherwise, so now it's going to say yes when I'm just moving, not clicking the mouse over a button. And it's going to say no when I am hovering the mouse where there is no button. So, okay, it doesn't work. Anybody sees why it doesn't work? Let's log this color of the buttons here to see if I have some problem in the variable name. Okay. The color itself, it's written in this this red, green, constant value names, and I'm comparing them to something that has RGB format, and these are strings. So let's fix this somehow. I'm gonna instead of having this red and green colors there, I'm going to say get random color.
Excuse me?
Yes.
Would you mind please repeating the color thing that you want to use?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Yeah, like you're using a if buttons of ID dot color is equal to color, right?
Yes. So I want I want.
You're using that one.
Can you repeat?
I don't understand why you're using that one.
This one. So I am getting a color where the mouse is. It could be the transparent black, or it could be some color that I assigned to the buttons. And I want here to figure out if indeed there is a button that has this color that I am hovering now with my mouse. And if that is true, I will want to change my cursor pointer, you will see soon, to be the hand cursor pointer in the interface. I'm not sure if this makes sense. So yeah.
Yeah, but we're having two buttons with different colors, so
Yes. So we can.
Okay.
Can you repeat? Yes.
Are we going to apply this to one of the buttons or both of them?
Yeah, so we have now different colors for the buttons so that we can distinguish between them. If they would be the same color, then we don't know which button was clicked. So later when we add actions to them, we need to know which one was actually clicked. So now I'm going to see if this color that I am clicking on belongs to some of the buttons or not. And if it does belong to some of the buttons, then I detect the true positive. If it doesn't belong, then it means that it is the background color. So at this stage, I just want to know if I am hovering over a button or not.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see, I think it will become clear. So this random color, get random color function, we need to define it. Basically, I want it to output the color in this same RGB form, and I want to have many buttons and I don't want to spend time writing these numbers, so I'm going to randomize these. The color values are between 0 and 255, and I don't know if this is gonna work without it, but I'm gonna use the floor math function because these colors should be integers. And yeah. Okay. Yes, if we have the yes here, I'm gonna return so that it doesn't print the no as well. This is, by the way, just something temporary that I'm trying here. And I remove this color logging because there are too many. Okay, just a second, my computer is behaving a bit strange. I need to re-log into the system. Can everybody still hear properly and see everything?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I had to re-sign into Windows for some reason. Okay, so what do we have now? We have, we didn't save. I'm removing unnecessary console loggings. So now we have no and no. Why is this? Or is it working, but maybe my computer is just lagging? Yeah, I think it is fine. So it's changing from yes to no only when I am hovering over some of the buttons in this case. So I could actually extract this component from here. Let's say, let's say to a function like is hovering. So now this is hovering function. is going to check if any of the buttons contain the color that I am over, and if so, it's gonna say yes. If not, it's gonna say no. If it's hovering, I'm going to change the style of the entire canvas to have a cursor, a pointer cursor, which is that hand cursor. Otherwise, this is going to be the default cursor style here. So let's see if this is working in any way. I don't know if my screen recording system or Teams is able to capture my mouse cursor. Can you actually see it transforming into this cursor hand thing here?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the whole thing that I wanted to do here. I wanted to have a function that checks if I am indeed hovering over a button or not. And to know that, I had to check all the colors. So basically, this color acts as a key, as an identifier. Each button is going to have one color key. And if I'm hovering over that color, then it means that the button with that key is triggered somehow. Now it is hovering over it, but I can do the same with the mouse down. So on mouse down, if I am hovering over that color, then I could, for example, log button was clicked. So if I refresh and click now, I'm gonna get button was clicked. But if I click anywhere else on the background, this is not going to happen. It only happens when I'm clicking on one of these two buttons. If I want to know which button was clicked, then I need to return here not just true or false, but I should actually return the button itself. So that's going to be, that would be more useful, I think. So let's see here, instead of is hovering, returning just true or false, maybe we say to return the button with this color. And here, log that button that was returned. So if I'm going to do this, when I click these buttons, something happens. I get a log. If I click on the empty space, nothing happens. So when I'm clicking on one of these buttons, I'm going to get its properties like the width, height, the color, and the location. So you can see the colors are different depending on which button I click on, essentially. So yeah, that's pretty much it for how to detect when we are over something and when we are clicking something. And you can see that actually we are able to distinguish which button was clicked already. So if I assign to this button some kind of callback function, like what should happen when I click this button, then this is going to be possible to trigger that function because I am detecting different clicks at this stage. Okay, but this code is becoming a little bit messy and with these kind of global variables, and I said that I want to encapsulate as much as possible of this code into a class that I can simply import and then have this kind of behavior happening seamlessly, like in a black box in future applications that I'm importing this. So for that, I'm going to create a new class, and I'm going to call this a button handler. And this button handler class is going to contain all this kind of functionality that enables me to create buttons. It's going to keep track of the buttons. It's going to handle the event listeners and so on. So basically, I want in my main function to just have something like button handler, maybe create button. I give it the properties here, and that's it. So I don't want my main to worry about all of this code here. This should be encapsulated in this module that is going to handle our button interactions. So this lesson is more on how to structure code and how to separate these kind of functionalities. So let's see if we can get this to work. Instead of the global variable here for the buttons, I'm actually going to remove it, and this is going to be now part of this button handler object. It's going to be empty in the beginning, and to declare something like global variables, but just inside this class scope, these are called static variables. So these can be referenced from the class name itself. You don't need to instantiate objects of this class. So our buttons is going to slowly move inside this button handler. And this is going to also contain some of our other functionalities. For example, we're going to have a static method for add event listener. So these event listeners are going to be on some canvas that we give the parameter, and I'm going to copy these in here and avoid using the global variable of the canvas that we have declared on the top. So I'm not doing anything new at this stage. I'm just reorganizing code in a way that allows me to have more flexibility in the future. Okay, so I'm getting event listeners. Great. This unmouse down and unmouse move, they are just floating functions here, and I want them to be methods of the button handler as well, so that I could have other mouse down, mouse move listeners if I want. So these are just part of the black box that will handle buttons afterwards. So I'm gonna take these and copy them here and change the syntax slightly because they need to become methods of the class itself. And here, when I'm calling on mouse down, I need to specify that this is the mouse down from button handler. It's not anymore a floating function that was just pasted there. These work with the canvas object here. Let me think. Yeah, I think we can still leave the global variable for now because I'm gonna do something else with it later. So this is just fine. And this is hovering is also going to go here as a method because it again depends on the buttons itself themselves and nothing else. And this buttons global variable needs to be now changed to be the static attribute of the buttons class. So we will not have a global variable anymore. All the buttons are going to be accessible from this button handler class itself. And what else? This get color and get random color, these are utility functions. These are functions that don't have to do with the with the buttons themselves. I could use these functions in other purposes. So I don't need to do this restructuring in this way. They make sense as separate functions, and they should be declared into some common JavaScript file, separate JavaScript file that I could use in many different parts. Same for the get mouse location. Maybe I want to detect the mouse location for other purposes, not just for handling the buttons. So it also constitutes as a utility function. Remove overlay is part of our interface because our interface has an overlay. So I leave that one outside also. And I move here the classes now, the button class and the button handler next to each other. So we are still missing this create button method. And I think that after that, we are done with this restructuring. So I'm going to create a button, and this one for now is going to have the same properties as here. Let's say location, width, height, and color. And I'm going to say pretty much this, but okay, this was stupid copying. Sorry. And I'm going to add to this buttons array here, which is local to this class, a new button with these parameters. And here the create button is going to now copy these values there. Okay, I think I just do this quickly. And I don't need these anymore. So notice how my main function is just becoming shorter and shorter. Essentially, I want to keep just these ones here. And maybe I want to draw the buttons. Draw buttons on the context. So let's do this after we get the context, and we won't need this anymore, but we do need to add here something like that with our button handler buttons. I need to also make this specification here. So I didn't really change anything. I did all of this as an example of refactoring. My main function now is relatively clean. I just create two buttons using my handler, and I'm asking it to draw them on the context. All the functionality was moved inside here. So if I ever need to use buttons in the future, I can copy this, move it to its separate JavaScript file, include that JavaScript file, and that's it. The only code I need to write is basically this, because I have included the button handler and I don't need to look at it anymore. So this lesson is more about how to structure code in bigger projects. Now let's see how many bugs I have, because usually this doesn't work as expected. Okay, so something doesn't work here. This event listeners is also something that I think I need to call somewhere. The event listeners are not triggering. Is hovering is not defined. So this is because here I need to specify that it is the is hovering from the button handler. Okay. It actually works now. So a lot of work went into this restructuring here, but yeah. So now we have colored buttons here. Detecting this mouse hover is working. Clicking on the different buttons is also working. Let's make them do something. So let's make them do something by passing a function to them. So yeah, let's do it somehow. Okay, I'm going to okay, sorry, this is becoming a little bit too confusing. Are there any questions so far, or is this really confusing because of all the restructuring that I did? Is it clear now after the restructuring? So this kind of refactoring is really important skill that you must have, and the reason why I do it on camera and not just show you the proper structure at the end is because you need to learn how to do this in practice as your code develops, and you notice that something you didn't plan for needs to be incorporated into the system. Okay, great.
Hey, one
Yeah.
question.
Yes.
Can you show where you hit the button class itself?
The button class is...
Didn't get the... Is it outside this? Yes, it's outside.
Yes, it is outside.
Yeah.
I think it's possible. I think it could be possible to have it inside this as well, because it's only used by the button handler. Like I don't have here new button anymore. All the new buttons are being declared inside the button handler. So in theory, I think it could go inside there as well. But good question. Very good question. Okay, now let's work a little bit on this. Yeah, let's identify them somehow. So I'm gonna say that the first button is B1, that the second button is B2. And when I create the button, I'm gonna say name, and each of these buttons is also going to have a name being passed to them. So the constructor needs to consider here name as one additional attribute. And I want to draw this name visibly on the button somehow. So maybe we say context field text this name. I'm going to be already at the proper location, but maybe we're gonna change this color to black so that we visibly see it. Otherwise it's gonna be colored text on the colored background and we won't be able to see this. Let's see. No, there is some error. Field text, I need to give it X and a Y, but I already translated to the proper location, so this can be 0, 0. It actually is probably there, but yeah, very barely visible. So maybe our font is this, I don't remember the, yeah, let's say that the font is going to depend on the height of the button. So if we have bigger buttons, then the font is going to be bigger. If we have smaller buttons, then this is going to be smaller. So let's say it's going to be half the height of the button and in pixels, and let's change the font to something nicer. Okay, now this B2 is in the middle of the button, but the way that text is being drawn by default in HTML is that the bottom left corner of the text is at the location. So if you want it to align horizontally, you do that. Now you can see that the text moved quite right in the middle of the button, and I think like this is going to vertically align these buttons as well. Now the thing is, and you probably will notice that when you go and click here or move your mouse there over B2, the text now is a different color than my button. So basically drawing the color, drawing black on top of this green color broke my system. I don't want this to happen. I want my buttons to work even if there is some text on them, even if they are all the same color, which is usually the case. Usually you don't make these buttons have crazy colorful patterns. So the way that you actually solve this thing is to, most elegantly, so you don't write so much extra code, is use two canvases. You draw the button on one canvas with styles and whatever properties you want it to have, but on the second canvas, you only draw the hit region of the button. So that one is going to be the the plain color, random color value uniquely identifying that button, a color key. And you will take the pixel values from this separate canvas, this another canvas that is just a helper canvas for evaluating hit tests. So this is essentially what I want to show you how to do now. You don't need to add this canvas visually on the page, but I will do it so that you see what is on it. So let's see how that could work. I'm gonna go back to the HTML. I'm gonna say here, hit test canvas, a new canvas added into the system. And maybe I'm gonna say, let's see what happens. Okay, we have another canvas that is somewhat overlapping the other one. Let's move this other canvas a little bit to the left. Okay, so now I have two canvases there. I go back to my main function and I notice that this code that is here setting the size of the canvas should be repeated for the hit test canvas. I want them to have the same size, but repeating code is a bad idea. So maybe we say function initialize canvas. I'm gonna copy this and say this is everybody understanding what I'm doing here. and why I'm doing it. Can somebody say why I'm doing this, why I'm extracting this as a function here, and why it's a good idea?
It's much more clear, and you can add canvases easily now.
Yeah,
Multiple if you need.
yeah, and how about now? I even have a parameter here, so I could make one canvas bigger, one canvas smaller if I would ever need to. So even more control over this this function here. So parameters usually are a good idea. Okay.
Radu, I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know why we don't like create a button handler. Like.
Yes. So of course, here you see that we have a new button, right? And you are asking why I don't do new button handler here. And
Yes.
then from this button handler, create button or something like this. So the reason I don't do it this way is because I don't need multiple instances of the button handler. I only need just one. It's one single entity that controls all the buttons. And if I were to implement it the same way that I implemented the other buttons, it gives the impression to people who write the code that, hey, I could make many of these. But it's not intended to be like that. It's intended to be this kind of manager, and one single entity would exist. So you could do it. You can implement things in many ways. You don't even need to use classes for these things necessarily. But this is a preferred style in general when you have this kind of handling objects there.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so now some things need to be changed here. I need to tell to my button handler that, hey, you're going to need to use a canvas for these hit tests. So let's just say, well, of course I could use global variables, but just bear with me for a moment. I'm copying this hit test canvas to the button handler because in theory, I don't need this hit test canvas to be in HTML DOM here. I could define it just in JavaScript, and your application doesn't need to know that this hit test canvas exists. It's something that the button handler is using internally as a black box to make things work. And in practice, I wouldn't need to show this here. So I could say here, create element, or I'm not sure the proper syntax now, and I'm not going to do it. And then your main code doesn't even know there is another canvas somewhere. But for visualizing and to demonstrate how the things work, I prefer to keep it here in the DOM. So bear with me for a moment. Now, in my button handler here, I'm drawing the buttons on this context, but I also want to draw the buttons on the hit test canvas. I hope this works. Okay, so I have my buttons now drawn on both canvases. This one on the right has no interaction whatsoever. It's just my mouse doesn't interact with it in any way. The one on the left still works, but see, when I'm hovering the text here, is breaking because I'm hovering black color, which is not the color key of the buttons. So the idea will be that on the right, on the hit test canvas, I'm not going to draw the button itself, but draw hit area. So this hit area is going to be just the rectangle, and the button needs to know what its hit area is. So here I'm gonna just remove all this fancy text stuff from the right, from the top of the button, and if I refresh the page, I essentially get the same thing on the right, but without my text. Now, when I'm getting the color here is hovering, sorry, not here. Where do I get the color? Yeah, when I add event listeners here in the button handler, I actually want to add event listeners not for the canvas, but for my, no, sorry, this is proper. Here, when I get the color, I don't want to get the color from the main canvas on the left. I want to get the color from the hit test canvas on the right. So and I don't need this anymore. So this is what will happen on mouse down, and this is what's gonna happen on mouse move. I think that this is gonna work. Let's see. So what happens now? It's a little bit tricky. Basically, when I'm hovering here on the left, I'm reading the color at the location, like now it is over B, over the text B, but it's getting the color not from here. It's getting the color from here on the right, from this canvas that could maybe doesn't even exist visually for the people, but it makes me, it allows me to hover over this B2 perfectly, no matter where I am, even over the style. It actually allows me also to change the color of this button to be, for example, white. Maybe I'm going to say that I want to give it a stroke style, black, for example. Doesn't work. Why is this not drawing the stroke here? Am I making some kind of error? Or maybe the stroke style, yeah, okay. Maybe the line is too thin or something. Yeah, okay. So basically, now you can say that I can make my buttons look like whatever I want them to be on the left, and this is still going to work. And when I click here on B1, I am clicking on B1, and when I'm clicking on B2, I am clicking on B2. So essentially, all the magic happens color-based, but the users see just this. Actually, I can, to demonstrate this, I can select this hit test canvas in the DOM tree itself. And I think that if I press delete now, it disappeared from the DOM. So users wouldn't know that there is such a thing there, but it's still in memory in JavaScript. The colors are still there, things are still drawing there. And if I clear now the console and, okay, it doesn't work. So it doesn't work because I removed it from the canvas there, and it expects it on the canvas. Damn. Yeah. Well, let's try to get it to work just for the demo purpose. So let's see how to do this. I don't remember exactly. Yeah, a bit messy here, but I hope this works. let's see. No. Hmm. Okay, I need to remove it from here. And I'm still getting some errors. Okay, how did this even work? Okay, it worked because of the global variable. I made here some mistake. Okay, my keyboard for some reason doesn't listen to me anymore. Can you still hear me properly?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about this. Yeah, so here hit test canvas again should have been specified that it's the one belonging in button handler, and I'm not entirely sure how this worked without this specification. So okay, so now it actually works. I'm clicking B1, I'm clicking B2, even though the document doesn't have another canvas there. So all the things are happening just because the element is defined in memory. And basically, this could happen inside of the button handler class, so you don't need to do this per se. But this was just to demonstrate that. So I'm gonna actually revert the code here so that we do see what happens on the screen as well. Yeah, sorry about this. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, sorry. was a bit... Okay, now it's back to normal. Great, I think that we are out of time, but we will continue this next week because I'm going to use this button system to make that piano app. So I could do still a little bit more things here. I want to make them change color when I'm hovering so that it indicates that my mouse is over some of the buttons. I also want to do a little bit more things, I think. And next week I will show how to do this callback, that when you define a button, you tell it what should happen when you press it. So today was pretty much a lot of tedious work to get something done that is very easy in other parts of HTML. Like, for example, I could go here in the body and simply say somewhere button, I am a button, maybe. Is it like this? And I have a button here in HTML, and I could say here in the button that I just wanted to do something like alert this hello, and when I press on it, I'm getting hello. So basically, very easy way to make a button in HTML. It's possible. But if you want your button to be part of the canvas and part of your game, you either have to move these HTML buttons somehow specifically to the canvas, which is possible, but not really easy either. And in some cases, like what I want to do with this virtual reality piano at the end of the course, I actually need to be able to press those buttons with my camera image. So this becomes really almost impossible to do with the basic button elements. So even though you can use multiple technologies to combine, in some cases, like what I want to do, it's impossible. And the last thing I want to say is the reason why I'm teaching this method and not some geometric based on the shape of the button is because of its flexibility, because you can have any kind of shape of buttons, and you can even have things that are moving around, like if you make these buttons move or something, you will still have a color on the hit test canvas here on the right. So that's it pretty much, but do you have any questions? Do you think this was confusing today?
I think we need to do a bit of practice for the button situation. So like we actually know that where we should place it and how it works, and like how I can animate it.
Yeah, we will practice more with the buttons next time, so I will continue with this code. And yeah, so I will continue with this code next time. And we will do some kind of animations, like I will make the button look a little different when I'm hovering the mouse. And I will also teach sound next time. So it's going to be two different things. Making the buttons look kind of like a piano, and adding sound when we press the keys. Yeah, but we will practice with this more. So do study the code meanwhile and try to understand the restructuring. So the whole lesson today was about having a structure that doesn't interfere with other parts of your projects.
Also, you can just figure out where the button is and which button is pressed just from the X and Y coordinate from the entire screen, if you just do a little math.
Yes, The problem is if one of the buttons, if your buttons are rectangle and their width and height changes, of course you can do the math depending on the button property itself. But then if one button you decide to add, it's going to be a circle. You need to change the math completely. If you're going to have a button that has rounded corners, it's even more complicated math. And if your button wants to look like a dog or something for whatever reason, this method is for that. So it's a bit overkill. It's not using the simple math as you say it. That has its place, definitely. But I think that you will find this useful. Many of you will find this kind of thing useful in your projects, especially if you're building games. Think about like if you make a shooter game, then basically you can have the hit detection of your character, and it can even be a moving character as long as you paint him with the same color on the hit canvas. You can experiment even more things, like maybe have the head a different color, and then you can even detect headshots or things like this. So I think that this is a powerful method that you should know exists. It's not the ideal in case of the square rectangle buttons that we are playing with right now, definitely. So you are right about that. Okay. Anything else? Okay, so if there is nothing else, then I think that we see each other on Friday. We see on Friday and discuss this exercises, and then we continue this next week. I don't know if this worked what I tried to do now, but I just wanted to write on the hit test canvas on the right that it is a hit test canvas, and that's it. So okay, so that's it, and see you next time.
Thank you. See you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.